Tonight, in this deep dive, we are going to listen to the quietest voice in the room, the one inside your own head. We are going to explore where it came from, whose words it is actually speaking, and why it has such profound control over the way you navigate your career, your relationships, and your sense of value.
Yeah, it's a really profound shift in perspective when you realize that this internal dialogue, the one you've just always accepted as your own identity, might actually be, well, an echo. And today we're going to trace that echo all the way back to its source.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to explore this massive, fascinating stack of research we've got. It covers everything from the neurobiology of early childhood development to behavioral economics and even, mid-century psychiatric theories.
Right, transactional analysis. It's a huge span of material.
Exactly. And we're going to do this without any rush, no judgment at all. Just a really steady, curious exploration of how human beings are wired. And to you, the listener sitting with us right now, we are talking directly to you. You are the third person at this table. We want to take all these dense academic concepts and hold them up to the light of your actual lived experience.
And just to set the tone, we are looking at these patterns of human behavior today entirely as observers. There's no blame to be assigned here, no ultimate failure to diagnose.
Right, we're not pointing fingers.
Exactly. What we're doing is simply mapping the terrain of the human mind. We're trying to understand how our earliest environments shape the way we, assign value to ourselves, and how that translates into how we manage our lives and our ambitions as adults.
I love that. So to start us off, I want to bypass the data entirely for just a second. I want to paint a highly specific picture, and I want you, listening, to see if you recognize this scene.
Go for it.
Okay, imagine you are sitting at your desk. It's late afternoon. The monitor glow is right in your eyes, and you are staring at a difficult email you need to send to a boss or a client. Or maybe it's a bank statement you've been totally avoiding.
Oh, yeah, the dreaded bank statement.
Right. And as your finger just kind of hovers over the mouse, suddenly this voice in your head speaks up. It doesn't shout. It just states with absolute chilling certainty, you're going to mess this up. Okay. Or you're being careless again.
It's a critique that feels just devastatingly personal, mostly because, it speaks with such undeniable authority.
And it's not just a passing thought, is it? It is a full physiological event. If you really pay attention to your body in that exact second, you feel it happen. There's a slight tightening in the chest.
Doesn't drop in your stomach.
Yes. Your breathing gets just a little bit shallower, and immediately there's this overwhelming urge to just shrink back, to delete the draft and write something way safer.
Yeah, to choose the easier path just to avoid making a mistake or facing that internal judgment.
And here's the truly bizarre part. The part that catches us completely off guard when we actually stop and notice it. Sometimes, years later, you're interacting with your own child or a partner, and suddenly you hear a very specific tone of voice come out of your own mouth.
The exact cadence.
The cadence, the pitch, the exact phrasing. And you realize with this massive jolt that it is the exact tone your caregivers used with you decades ago. You didn't consciously choose to speak that way.
No, it just bypasses your conscious mind entirely.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly jarring realization, but it's a vital one. It really brings us to a foundational concept in understanding how human psychology is built inside a family.
Okay, lay it on us.
To begin understanding this voice, we have to recognize that in every single family, there are always dual histories running simultaneously.
Dual histories, meaning like two completely separate realities happening in the exact same living room.
Exactly that. There is the version of the family history that the parent is living, which is constantly filtered through their adult context. It includes, their exhaustion after a 10-hour shift, unspoken financial anxieties, genuine good intentions.
Just the overwhelming stress of keeping a household from falling apart, right?
Right. That is their reality. But running perfectly parallel to that is the version the child is absorbing. And the child's version is filtered through this rapidly developing, highly vulnerable brain that processes pure emotional texture.
Without any of the adult context. Because, a 4-year-old has no concept of inflation or a looming mortgage payment.
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
So when a parent snaps over spilled milk because they just realize they're short on rent, the adult experiences that as, I'm under severe financial stress and I lost my patience.
But the 4-year-old just experiences, I am a burden, I am clumsy, and the world is super dangerous right now.
Precisely. The parent you experience as a child might not be the parent they remember being.
Wow. And this feels like a crucial distinction to make for anyone listening. This is not about assigning blame. We are not putting parents on trial here.
No, not at all. It is simply the mechanical reality of human perception.
Hmm.
The child's brain is recording the emotional weather of the home, not the logistical reality of the parent's struggle.
And that emotional weather, it leaves a permanent imprint, doesn't it?
It does. The child takes that highly localized, specific interaction and they crystallize it into a universal law about how the world works and what their place in it is.
Which means the parent we carry in our heads, that heavy, critical voice telling us we are careless while we sit at our desk, might actually be a ghost.
A ghost is a good way to put it. A recording of a moment that the actual parent probably doesn't even remember.
But our childhood brain captured it, digitized it, and preserved it in amber. So let's give this a name. What do we actually call this psychological ghost?
In psychological terms, this transition is called the introjected script, or sometimes the inherited voice.
The introjected script. I have to say, the word introjected is so evocative. It sounds like swallowing something whole without chewing it. Like it's just sitting there in your stomach, heavy and fully formed.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, actually.
Yeah.
Introjection is the mechanism where the external rules, the moral judgments, and the communication styles of our early caregivers literally become our autonomous internal dialogue.
You don't question it, you just absorb it. And having a concrete name for that voice, I mean, it feels like it changes your whole relationship to it.
It definitely does.
The listener can sit there and think, so that is what this is called. It's an introjected script. It means this voice wasn't there from the beginning. It was installed.
Installed is the perfect word. Early psychiatric thought spent a great deal of time exploring how and why this installation process happens.
Yeah.
If we look back at figures like Sigmund Freud and his contemporaries, Sender Ferenczi.
Right, the early psychoanalysis guys.
Exactly. They proposed a rather stark mechanical view of socialization. They argued that culture, morality, and societal rules are essentially installed in the individual through a mechanism of guilt.
Guilt as a tool for civilization. So the idea is that society functions best when external prohibitions, like a parent constantly having to monitor you, are no longer needed.
Right. The parent doesn't need to be in the room because they have installed a version of themselves inside your mind to police your behavior.
It's highly efficient from an evolutionary standpoint. I mean, it keeps the kid out of traffic.
It keeps the child safe, and it keeps society functioning. But this efficiency comes at a profound cost to the child's original innate nature.
Okay, let's dig into that cost. Where does Eric Berne fit into this?
So, mid-20th century psychiatrist Eric Berne developed transactional analysis. He noted that children do not start out rigid or fearful. They actually operate with incredible natural intuition.
He called this the little professor, right? Or the free child.
Yes, the little professor.
Yeah.
It's a highly perceptive, intuitive state.
I love that concept because anyone who has spent time around a toddler knows they are essentially tiny, highly calibrated emotional lie detectors.
They really are.
You can look at a 3-year-old and say, I'm fine with this big plastered smile, and they will look back at you with total skepticism. They don't know the vocabulary, but they feel the micro tension in your jaw.
They absolutely know when the emotional weather in the room has shifted. But over time, according to Berne, those sharp faculties of the free child are gradually muffled.
Because they realize their pure observations conflict with the rules of the house.
Exactly. The psyche realizes it must adapt to survive the family environment. So it begins to introject the external rules, transforming it into what Berne called the adapted child.
And the adapted child is governed by a rigid, often punitive, internal parent. So that original intuition is still there, but it's trapped beneath layers of inherited scripts.
The child essentially trades their intuition for safety. They trade the little professor for the adapted child.
This sounds like a beautiful philosophical metaphor, but I want to take this entirely out of the realm of pure psychiatric theory, because we have some incredible scientific research in our stack today that shows this is physiological.
It is very much physiological. The modern science here acts as a profound confirmation of what those early psychologists suspected.
Let's look at the neurobiology of words. There's this study by researcher Maria Richter titled, Do Words Hurt?
Yes, and she looks specifically at the neurological impact of negative language on the human brain. And spoiler alert,
Yeah.
Yes, they do hurt.
Right. But it's the mechanism of how they hurt that is so revealing. We aren't just talking about hurt feelings here.
Not at all. Richter used fMRI functional magnetic resonance imaging to monitor the blood flow and activity in the brains of participants as they listened to or even just imagined negative words.
Wow, just imagining them.
Yes. What they found is that negative words aren't just psychologically unpleasant. They literally, physically alter the brain's activity in real time.
So what exactly lights up on the scan when someone hears a harsh word?
Hearing or imagining negative words significantly increases what is called implicit processing,
Mm.
or IMP, within a specific deep region of the brain called the subgenual anterior cingulate cortex.
Okay, wait, the SACC. Let's break that down because I don't want us to get lost in the medical jargon. What is implicit processing and what does the SACC actually do?
Good point. Implicit processing means the brain is doing complex work beneath your conscious awareness. You aren't choosing to process it, it's automatic.
Okay, so it's happening in the background.
Right. And the SECC is deeply involved in regulating emotional responses, particularly negative emotions and stress. When it's activated by those negative words, it acts as a relay station.
A relay station to where?
It signals the hypothalamus to trigger the release of stress and anxiety-inducing hormones like cortisol throughout the entire body.
Hold on, so you're saying a harsh word triggers the exact same neurological real estate as physical pain. The brain literally doesn't differentiate between someone telling you you're lazy and an actual physical threat.
Physiologically, the difference is negligible. It initiates a systemic threat response. It alters our state of arousal, elevates our heart rate, and shifts our biology into a readiness to fight, flee, or freeze.
Wow. So when a young child whose brain is still, highly plastic hears a label like you're being careless, the brain isn't just passively receiving vocabulary.
No, it is absorbing a chemical shock. It is structurally changing the physical landscape of their nervous system.
But this raises a glaring question for me. If these early interactions are so neurologically powerful, why can't we remember them? I mean, I have almost zero concrete memories before I was 3 or 4. Where does all that data go?
It's a profound paradox, and it brings us to the neurology of early memory, specifically childhood amnesia.
Right. How can an environment I don't even remember dictate my reactions at my desk 30 years later?
To understand that, we have to look at the construction timeline of the human brain. We have to look at how two very different brain structures mature at completely different rates.
The amygdala and the hippocampus. Let's lay out the blueprints for these two.
The amygdala is an almond-shaped cluster located deep within the temporal lobe. Its primary concern is emotion, threat detection, and encoding the emotional significance of an event.
It's the brain's primordial alarm bell.
Exactly. And because survival depends on it, the amygdala comes online very early. It is fully functional practically from birth, meticulously recording the emotional texture of every experience.
Okay, and the hippocampus.
The hippocampus is responsible for encoding explicit autobiographical memory. It creates the narrative of our lives, the who, what, where, and when. But it takes much longer to develop. It requires language acquisition.
So, if I'm getting this, the alarm bell is fully operational from day 1, but the filing clerk who actually writes down the detailed incident report hasn't even shown up to the office yet.
That is an excellent way to visualize it. Because the amygdala is hyperactive before the hippocampus is fully formed, our earliest memories are entirely emotional. They are amygdala-driven.
We retain the physical sensation of fear or the bodily feeling of abandonment, but without the narrative context.
Right. We remember the feeling of the room, but we have no memory of the color of the walls or the specific words that were said.
Which perfectly explains that physical sensation we talked about at the very beginning. When that difficult email triggers you at your desk, your amygdala is just releasing the exact same chemical cocktail of threat.
Yes, because the current emotional environment, the feeling of impending evaluation, feels familiar to that early contextless data.
And what's fascinating about childhood amnesia is that the external environment actually dictates how quickly that narrative filing clerk shows up. Research shows that maternal narrative style shapes memory retention.
It's about scaffolding. A family environment that openly discusses events, asking things like, how did that make you feel? Helps build the neural pathways of the hippocampus.
It gives the child a framework. But if the environment is silent, or if emotional expression is suppressed, those early memories remain locked in the amygdala as pure physiological states of arousal.
Exactly. The emotional content of the home builds the actual architecture of the brain.
Which brings us to this massive longitudinal study from Brigham Young University. I really want to spend some time on this because they looked directly at how this emotional architecture gets built over time.
The BYU study is a cornerstone. They followed a cohort of children over a huge developmental window starting at 12 months old and tracking them to 60 months.
And they weren't looking at what schools they attended. They were specifically looking at a concept called co-regulation in dyadic communication.
Yes. Dyadic communication, meaning the real-time, back-and-forth interaction between the parent and the infant.
They observed how they played together in a lab and coded their communication into 5 specific styles. It is like looking at the raw blueprints of human relationships. Let's walk through these 5 styles.
The first is symmetrical co-regulation. This is characterized by mutual coordinated participation. Both parent and child are actively engaged, continuously modifying their reactions.
It's an intricate dance, a perfect volley back and forth. The baby giggles, the mother speaks in a soothing tone.
Precisely. Then they identified asymmetrical co-regulation. Here, there is mutual attention, but only one individual is actively innovating the interaction.
So one person is bidding for attention and the other is just observing, like a child building a tower while the parent just nods periodically while reading a magazine.
Exactly. Then there is unilateral co-regulation.
Reading the description of this one just gave me a painful mental image.
Unilateral is where one is actively attempting to engage, but the other is entirely not paying attention. Think of a toddler pulling on the pant leg of a parent absorbed in their phone.
The connection is totally one-sided. And then it gets darker. Disruptive co-regulation, what did this look like?
Disruptive occurs when one individual actively interrupts or sabotages the activity of the other to force an interaction. And crucially, there is no subsequent attempt to soothe or repair the negative emotion.
Like a parent snatching a toy away just to get attention, the kid cries, and the parent ignores the distress.
Right. And finally, the fifth style is unengaged. Simply put, neither partner is interacting with each other despite sharing the same space.
So the researchers tracked these kids for years to see what predicted the development of empathy by age 5. Now here's why I have a genuine question. Does the flawless, perfect, symmetrical communication style guarantee a perfectly empathetic child?
It's a vital question, and the data provides a highly surprising answer. Actually, no, it doesn't.
I found this astonishing. So all that perfect textbook parenting isn't what creates empathy. What actually does?
Actually, family expressiveness, the open, emotional climate of the home, both positive and negative, predicted empathy better than just the mechanical style of dyadic communication.
That is a massive revelation. It means that building a healthy human isn't about flawless execution of a sterile technique. It's the emotional content that builds the brain's architecture.
Precisely. Co-regulation is just the mechanical architecture. Family expressiveness provides the actual substance.
It means a home can be a bit chaotic. Emotions can exist openly. But when parents sanitize the environment by denying or suppressing emotions, they sidestep educating the child.
And when that emotional climate becomes fundamentally neglectful or hostile, the neurological consequences are severe.
Which leads us to Syndrome Z and the neurobiology of childhood adversity. When caregivers lack emotional synchrony, what happens to the child's brain?
It defaults to amygdala-driven emotional survival mechanisms. The brain is a prediction machine. It tries to predict others' behavior to survive.
Because to an infant, the parent literally equals survival. Food, shelter, safety.
Right. If the environment is emotionally barren, the brain shifts its entire metabolic focus to basic survival, altering the reward system and dopamine homeostasis.
It's like living in a house where the fire alarm is blaring 24 hours a day. You aren't going to calmly read a book. You're frozen by the door, ready to run.
That constant state of alarm deeply alters the brain. The child aggressively seeks out minimal scraps of predictability.
Okay, so we have this incredible biological machine wiring itself to survive a specific home, but then time passes. We grow up, we enter the workforce, and those survival mechanisms, those introjected scripts, they come with us.
They don't magically disappear just because you sign a lease.
Yeah.
Let's look at how these invisible scripts play out in real life.
Let's talk about praise versus encouragement, the candy analogy. This is a pattern almost everyone will recognize. We have research here from Dr. Carol Dweck.
Yes. Dweck spent decades looking at how different types of language impact motivation.
When I read her methodology, I just kept thinking, praise is like a candy. A little is fine, but it's external approval. You're so smart.
The defining characteristic of praise is that it evaluates inherent traits. And Dweck's research reveals something counterintuitive. Children consistently praised for being smart actually become less resilient.
Which feels completely backward. Why does telling someone they are smart create fragility?
It creates a trap. If a child believes their value comes from an unchangeable trait like being smart, They become terrified of doing anything that might disprove that label.
So later, they choose easier tasks because they are terrified of risking a mistake.
Exactly. When given a choice, the praised children chose the easy puzzle. They were risk-averse. But children encouraged for their effort chose the more challenging tasks.
Because they view success as something within their control. It's the protein, not the candy.
Right, and Kurt's psychology discusses a 5.1 ratio of positive interactions to criticism. But the key is shifting from "I like it" to "I notice you worked hard on this."
It changes everything. It takes the adult's absolute judgment out of the equation.
It builds an internal locus of control. And if we want to see this in action, we have to look at the MIR Institute in Brazil.
Yes. This is hands down my favorite piece of research today. They set up a 16-hour course for 9 to 13-year-olds.
To test the limits of transactional analysis, they created a democratic environment based on explicit contracts.
And the kids negotiated tasks, cooked meals, all operating from what Claude Steiner called the stroke economy. Let's define that.
The stroke economy posits that psychological recognition affection, smiles, even negative attention acts as a fundamental human currency. We all need strokes to survive.
And in this Brazilian experiment, the adult facilitators were super deliberate about the strokes they provided. When chaos naturally happened, kids spilling tea 8 times, throwing paper airplanes, the adults deliberately refused to enter the critical parent ego state.
There was no scolding. When tea spilled, they just maintained their adult ego state. They didn't punish them.
The kids were totally unsettled. A boy finally asked why there was no reprimand.
Because their interjected scripts told them spilled tea equals severe punishment. This absence of a punitive reaction proves something incredible.
When the adult ego state can exist without fear of a critical parent, incredible self-regulation flourishes.
Exactly. Their free child intuition was allowed to operate clearly.
So clearly that they collaboratively built a 1.4-meter Lego egogram of Brazil's then-president Michael Temer to practice diagnosing transactions.
Yes. And just to be explicitly clear, we are impartially reporting this as a sociological exercise of their intuition. We are not endorsing any political viewpoint.
Right, we're just observing the children's diagnostic accuracy. It's amazing. But most of us didn't grow up in that environment. We internalized the critical parent. How does this connect to our adult financial and career behaviors?
We see the direct mechanism in the Iris Unipaeus study. Parental criticism directly correlates with lower career confidence in adulthood. And it's mediated entirely by a fear of an uncertain future.
A fear of an uncertain future. So uncertainty equals danger. Ambiguity equals a loss of safety.
Precisely. And in decision neuroscience, the brain assigns value to options, constantly weighing extrinsic rewards, like money, against safety concerns.
The text calls this value-driven attentional capture, or VDC. But wait, focusing on fear when offered a promotion, how is that a survival mechanism? It feels like self-sabotage.
To the rational adult mind, yes. But VDIC automatically pulls our attention towards stimuli associated with past survival tactics, even when it's disadvantageous today.
So your VDIC system instantly associates the uncertainty of a new promotion with the volatile childhood environment where uncertainty led to criticism.
Exactly. Our financial anxieties are often just our childhood survival mechanisms capturing our attention.
Which brings us to the most critical part of this entire deep dive, the pivot. If you are listening to this right now and you struggle with a harsh inner critic, career anxiety, or money fears, I want you to hear this clearly. This is not a flaw.
It is not something to fix. It is a historical adaptation.
You are not broken. You are human.
Realizing this is the vital shift away from shame. Your behavior makes complete human sense.
And to truly understand how brilliant this adaptation was, we have to talk about the Austrian goblins.
Yes, the unworthies. This comes from an Austrian children's book by Himmelbauer and Grundauer. They personified toxic internal injunctions, the I am bad scripts, as physical goblins.
The protagonist physically carries them. It separates the core identity from the script, and the psychological mechanism here is just staggering. It has to do with magical thinking.
Children operate on magical thinking. When faced with a critical caregiver, recognizing the objective truth that the caregiver is deeply flawed is too terrifying. It threatens their survival.
So instead of deciding my parent is broken, the child decides I must be the broken one. It is an incredible adaptive survival mechanism.
It really is. It protects the vital bond with the caregiver at the expense of their own self-worth.
Therefore, that heavy critical voice you carry, was actually your brilliant childhood brain protecting your relationship with your caregivers. You were just carrying something heavy. You were not inherently flawed.
Mary McClure Goulding's technique highlights this perfectly, transforming fear into absurdity to snap the brain out of neurological alarm.
Like visualizing the goblins as ridiculous clowns to interrupt the VDAC pattern. So let's pull this idea upward. How does this connect to the macro level?
We can connect the interjected script to Erik Erikson's developmental stages. When parents are raising kids, they are in the generativity versus stagnation stage, doing their best.
But in later life, they enter integrity versus despair, a reckoning where they must look back and accept their life.
And the hardest lesson arrives when adult children share their memories, and the parent realizes their best efforts had limits, and those limits became the child's wounds.
Psychology shows adult children avoid parents not over one dramatic event, but 1,000 small moments where authenticity felt dangerous.
Exactly.
And this synthesized why this matters for the listener's relationship with money. Money is never just a number. It is intertwined with our stroke economy. It represents safety, validation, and survival.
When we agonize over a career decision, we are often just experiencing the echo of an early environment where mistakes were punished.
But we can use the SpongeBob effect from the Austrian book. We can operate on two frequencies. We can read the situation from our adult ego state, soothe our free child, and step out of the labyrinth of predetermined life scripts.
Yes.
So, to just slow things down and summarize our journey, we moved from the neuroscience of words physically altering the brain to the candy of praise versus the protein of encouragement. We looked at the Austrian goblins and realized that our financial and career fears are very often just echoes of inherited scripts.
Next time you hear that harsh internal voice regarding your work or your worth, try to listen to the accent of that voice. Who is really speaking? And what would happen if you simply recognized it as an old goblin you no longer need to carry?
If this conversation felt true for you, as something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one.
We are building a community here, people who think about money differently. Not as a number to chase, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this.
Yeah.
And we are genuinely glad you are here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.